I think that generation of coaches is dying out, that they're the isolationists that don't want anything to go on with the building and stuff. I think you look at the newer generation of coaches that are coming up, my age, younger and stuff. They understand the importance of a community and of a family on that campus and getting everybody on your side and also utilizing technology. I think this is this whole terrible situation that we're in right now is such an eye opener on things. Just because things have been done the same way forever doesn't necessarily mean they're the only way or the right way. I know of a couple of coaches in the area that have talked about this taking the place of Saturdays or possibly Sundays during the weekend, so they can be around their families more. I think it's an important thing to understand technology. If, just talking to young coaches, anybody that does watch this, that's wondering what to do, don't shy away from, using technology and utilizing it to the best that you can. A lot of things that I do are still kind of more, I would say, old school, like on Excel things, but I'm going to put a lot of things in my kids' hands, and I'll show you here in a little bit. But a lot of it, I put little watermarks on. I'll make personal, like, I like to make things for the program. I did most of this for my phone. The time that you invest, I think greatly is outweighed by the reciprocated, the fallout from it, because people see that it looks official. Everything's about branding nowadays, and in social media, like I treat my Twitter, and I believe that it's like a live resume, and I think if professionals look at it that way, that they, whether we like it or not, it's not going to go away. And that, in fact, it on a lot of times, it's the first impression nowadays, and so it's important to understand that you're putting out your best you out there, that, we have like our own little small town newspapers that we get to put out and make the most impact on and impressions. That's the word I was looking for that Twitter uses. Most impressions on people on a day-to-day basis, and especially by taking advantage of our athletes. They have a hard time putting the phones down. Well, is it better to sit there and just be stubborn and try to buck that system, or try to find ways to work it? One of the things that I've done in the past, and I'm about to start up, is like hashtag Technique Tuesday. So if there's specific techniques that I want my guys to look for, I trick them into it. They can find these NFL college videos of a player that's demonstrating technique that I'm asking them to do. And now you're getting into, hey, if they can recognize it, now there's a little bit of an understanding and stuff like that. So trying to put them in situations that they want to learn. And I think offensive line especially is a very, very special group. It's near and dear to my heart. And it means a lot to me, because I was always, as an offensive lineman, I was a bigger kid. I'm kind of a book nerd type person, and sports allowed me to break out of a shell. I was blessed to have a little bit of ability. I played Division I ball over at SFA, Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches, Texas, FBS 1AA. But anyways, lucky enough to go do that and everything. And I had a coach there, Robert Walker, who made it special for us and made it about a group, because a lot of times we're those outsiders. We're those guys that don't feel like we're full-on athletes. I always call them fatletes to begin. We're a little bit different of an athlete than everybody else, but it still takes a lot of athleticism. And I think it's important to show your players that it's special to them. And I try to do things and I tell my guys, and I hang my hat on it, that nobody takes care of their players like I take care of my guys. I'm big on doing things like, hey, we set a little goal here, rushing, have you over at the house. And I think little things like that go a long way. It's the one position on the field, skilled players, you have to teach humility to. They have swagger, they have confidence, because wide receiver, they have all this ability. Offensive linemen are the league of extraordinary citizens most of the time. They're the one position on the field that you actually have to teach a little bit of swagger. You got to teach that it's okay to be confident, and what that difference is between confidence and arrogance right there. So, in confidence and being cocky. So I love the fact of that the position is got guys that are we more than me guys. And that's what I've always been. And I think those are key parts in an offensive lineman, that they're going to sit there and they understand the sacrifice of the individuality sometimes for a greater good, and the importance of being on a team and knowing that your role matters, and that things couldn't get done without you, whether you get the accolades or not. To know that you outworked everybody and to hang your hat on that is something I think offensive linemen should do. I'm going to start out just kind of talking about some of my, like I've done, just, that's kind of more of my philosophy on what offensive linemen are. I think, you get all sorts at the high school level. You get some guys, sometimes you get those little guys that if they're not fast enough to play wide receiver, they don't know where to put them. They put them over an O-line. And I love those guys just as much. I want anybody over there that wants to be a part of it, and I want them to feel like a part of it, and I want them to take pride in the work. But if I'm looking for characteristics, centers and guards can be a little shorter, especially if you're a pocket protector, a pocket passer, so your quarterback can see his lanes. They're going to be, still, 6 foot, 6'2", ideally. And I'm blessed, here in the Houston area, we got some pretty big boys. And then those tackles you want, like Groot off of Guardians of the Galaxy, just the tree trunk, straight up, long body types right there, especially with the guys that they got at the second level and further, that just can come off the edge so fast and have such reach. You got to be able to match it. And I think, little things like that play into it. I ask a lot of my linemen. I teach in a concept based. I think it's important to teach like whole part, whole type things, because they've got to understand where they fit in. No other position in any other sport requires 5 guys to be in perfect unison and understanding and trust to be able to effectively and efficiently be productive on a consistent basis. A lot of other sports, you may have to coordinate, like in basketball, you may have 5 guys, but still one of those guys has got to be the shot caller and the trigger puller. On the offensive line, we have to work in unison, especially I'm more of a zone guy. We've got to understand, trust each other on those combos, and we never get any praise for it. And we just got to know that when we score, when we produce, that's us that gets it done. And I think that's such an important thing out of those guys. I'm about to pull up just kind of some different presentations that I've done in the past and go over real quick. I made this a couple of years ago. I was still at Deer Park, which is a school on the southeast side of Houston. It's a large school. Deer Park's got about 4,000 kids, which was crazy to be at a school with that many. I've taught and coached at schools that had 400 kids and schools that had 4,000 kids, urban, suburban, rural. I've been everywhere, at least in this East Texas area. And, you have a lot of consistencies among them. You'd be surprised, So, just talking about when does the block start, and I'm going to zoom through this really, and I can share this with you, Coach, and later, but, it's always more than a body on a body. I never liked it when guys were like, we just got to get a hat on a hat, body on a body, blocking schemes are like trig functions in calculus. You have to ask those guys to be able to manipulate a ton of variables to a point that not only can they recall the information, but synthesize and be able to extrapolate and make their own decisions based on it. I don't want robots. So you can't just say it's a body on a body. You could have various functions and it changes. And I think that's an important thing to know. Like when you're trying to put stuff on your lineman, make sure that you're rule-based. You don't want a lot of if-then statements because it changes and now you're just making it more difficult. When you're looking at run schemes, it's hard to get over about 5 or 6. If you coaches out there that are looking at trying to hold a whole offense, it's not like on Madden where you can just push buttons. Those guys got to recall all that information. It's like chess boxing. They've got to sit there and be able to make cognitive decisions in a dynamic, open world where a lot of things are going on in their heads. So you want to keep it simple. I think 5 or 6 run schemes has pros. You can pair it up, but you'll end up with about 5 or 6. And if you can do that and have consistent rules, you'll be all right. Okay. Mentally, effective O linemen are smart players. You got to be a smart guy. You got to be able. When I was at college, we always had the highest GPA on campus, and you'll notice that your offensive linemen are generally going to be smarter guys. They're going to be able to sit there and process information, take input, and be able to exploit. And then, of course, you have some guys that are just freaks that they can do their thing. And I was always a mental type player. That would really help me. Physical alignment tend to be on the bottom of what most athletic scales, but it's crazy. BMI, stuff like that, I've never even listened to because I've always been over 250 pounds, close to 300 pounds. According to them, I should be in a rascal going around Walmart. But, I can still move and stuff at 38 years old. And at the time when I was playing in college, I was around 285 at about 19% body fat. So can't say that that's not athletic. It's just a different skill set. We're not going to run 40s, but there's not many times that I ask my linemen to run 40s. Kind of always goes back, not that it compares to Earl Campbell, but one of my favorite quotes, one time Earl Campbell came into camp and they said he couldn't run a mile. So Bum Phillips said, well, next time that we're third in a mile, I won't run him. Look at what you need skill set wise from your athletes and be understand that they have their athleticism all. Usually the hip flexion, hip explosiveness, and power is a big one. And being able to understand spatial awareness. It takes selfless, relentless effort. We don't get to rotate. D linemen, defensive players going 3, usually 3, 4, maybe even a 2-play rotation, tops 5-play rotation. Unless I have to, I don't want to take an offensive lineman out because the trust that they have to and the use, they have to get so used to working with the same people. And I think that's why you see a lot of colleges and pros, they look so much better blocking wise because at the high school level, at best I have 1 kid, maybe 2 for 3 years, but mostly I've got them 1 or 2, where in college, those guys are going to work together for 3 or 4 years. Pros, some of those guys, who knows how long they work together, 5, 10 years. And the longer you work with somebody on the offensive line, you just gain this unsaid trust, that when the timing they're going to come off and stuff like that. But you're just always going to sit there and show up with that hard hat mentality that I am going to outwork everybody day in, day out, every play, every day, every freaking time. There's never a time anyone's going to outwork me. Okay. Listen, think, play, finish. Those are things that you got to do. You got to be able to be quiet and listen, whether you're no huddle or huddle. You got to think, you got to process, and then you got to play. You got to turn that thinking off. That's where reps, practice is for thinking, games for balling. You got to be able to rep stuff enough that they're going to sit there and not create hesitation, and that they go and they got to understand finish, that we're going to the echo of the whistle. The block start pre-snap with the call. You got to sit there and understand all of that. Just looking at splits and depth, I believe on trying to utilize as much depth as possible because it allows me to take my steps. What I tell my guys is put my helmet on the bottom of the center's number. So you can see on the picture right there, I'm trying to back up because, and I'll get to it here in a second. My steps, I'm real big on compartmentalizing things, and I call steps, our first 3 steps, the position, power, and pass step. Until I get my second step in the ground, I have no power. So by backing up, I can allow myself to sit there and get my second step in the ground, and allows, if they've got some kind of, NT twist or slant, I can maybe pick it up. Our splits, we're going to start out about 18 to 24 inches across the board, but I'm a big proponent of what I call smart splits, or what they call smart splits, which is, if I'm running inside zone, I'm running an A-gap play. I might want to widen out just a little bit to create bigger lanes. If I'm running an outside zone, I want to get to the edge quicker, I can cut my splits a little bit. So it's about playing with that splits in depth as they get more and more experience. That Z right there is big. You got to have great hip flexion. And a lot of coaches, they have a misunderstanding. They're like, well, put them under the chute and lower it all the way. Well, that sounds good, but if you don't take care of it in off season, if you're not making sure your mobility issues are addressed there, you're still going to have a hard time. And an offensive lineman has got to be able to have that right there, where that butt's a little bit lower than that shoulder's right there. Okay, it's a misconception that physiologically I should have a flat back or shoulders below my hips. Because if you've looked at sprinters or anything like that, once my hips get up above my shoulders, my first step, I can drive out, but by my third, I'm going to pop up. Whereas if I have good hip flexion right here, I can maintain right there and make sure that I'm staying lower. When it says power triangle, okay, what I mean by that is my ankles should always slightly be outside my knees. My knees should always slightly be outside my hip right there, because that's going to make a triangle. Triangles and circles are your strongest shapes found in nature. So, because, you're splitting and diverting force. You're going to hear me talk kind of sciencey here a little bit. I've taught physics most of my career. I'm a composite science teacher, so I believe in a lot of physics and using that science to validate technique. The back foot should be what they call a kickstand. If anybody's ever read any of Charles Bentley stuff, I'm not a purist or anything, but I think he has great points. You want that foot just kind of turned out a little bit so you can get all those cleats in the ground and be. It's all about getting cleats in the ground. I tell my players, when I want to be fast, I want to get up on the balls of my feet. When I want to be strong, I want to be flat-footed. So most of the time, since we're trying to move bodies, we need to make sure that we're driving all our cleats in the ground. Okay. The weight, the hand placed, if to pick up the same side eye. So you can see in the picture right here, if his eyeball fell out, that's where his hand's going to be. Okay. And he's got a little bit of weight on his hand. Those NFL guys can get away with a lot of stuff, but I think this is a great stance. If you notice right here, great flexion, feet are flat in the ground. He's going to sit there, come off and get off on somebody right there. So when I was talking about my three steps, my position, my power, and my pass step, my first step is trying to put my hips in a position to cover the defender's hips. I believe that if you were to distill blocking to the most purest thing, the whole goal is to cover their hips with my hips. So I've got to take steps that put me in position to do it. My second step is a power step. Let's see if this plays still. Okay, and you can see the left guard here does a great job. His first step, he's sucking up that air between the center right there so he can get over to that nose right there. So that's what I mean by the position step. My power step, okay, Jim Turner, that used to be at A&M, I'm just starting to get into some of this stuff. He always says your second step's got to be in front of the other one. There's a couple of instances, especially if you're some of those guys that get a little bit more advanced have banana steps and stuff like that. If you've ever heard of the McNally stuff, you go behind, but that's in very, very rare cases. But that power step has got to come forward, okay? So right here, you can see the hip roll right there, okay? So that right there, he's taking a good position step, and now once my second step comes forward, now it's getting that triple extension of my hips, ankles, and knees like we're trying to do on the Olympic lifts and things like that. Okay, and that starts with getting that second step up. I always tell them if I was going to take a 50-pound sack and I had to put it up on a shelf, okay, I couldn't leave my feet behind. I got to step underneath it so I can lift. And another demonstration that you can do, get one of your smaller offensive linemen and find one of your bigger guys and tell them pick him up. Because when you pick up, you've got to get your hips underneath the guy. You can't pick up a big guy from way out here. You got to bring your hips up there. And we'll get a little bit in there, more into that in a second. And then my third step is my pass step. It's when my decision has to be made. Okay, so by my third step, am I going to maintain the contact with the zone combo? Have I gotten over to it? Do I need to climb? Decisions are made. And if you've got into wide zone or mid zone, whatever you want to call it, do I need to wash now or can I reach? So this guy should be climbing. Boom. And you can see he stays on his path. Now, he didn't finish up right, but he knew that guy vacated, so he needs to get vertical right there. And so that third step set his path, and you can see that he stays on that path right there, okay? And I think that's an important thing. So I call the steps the position, power, and pass step, just as the first three. Hips and hands, I'll talk to that a little bit later. Heads and eyes. Eyes are an important thing. Vision is unreal. You know, I think if you look at a lot of superior athletes in team sports, if you were to ever give them an eye test, I would almost guarantee across the board you would have an average, a higher average of visual acuity than the standard population. You know, you talk about old Mike Singletary back here, Samurai Mike, and how he saw everything. You know, you've got to be able to have that vision right there. I tried to get fancy, I guess, make videos, arrows and stuff when I made this. I apologize. Let's see what I'm looking at. Okay, he tracked the guy right there. His eyes, you're looking at the center right here. Okay, his helmet gets right to 40, takes his eyes on him. Okay, you know, one of the things that they talk about, like in zone play, I block first level with my hands, and then I'm going to block second level. I'm going to block second level with my eyes right there, okay? And then finish. This is one of my favorite pictures ever, okay? I love this picture right here because you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pancake cuts. Another guy's going for another one, and this guy looks like he's hunting up. This is finished right here now, okay? This is a mindset. This is an attitude that it doesn't matter. I'll tell you what we're running. There's nothing you can do about it. And I think that's big out of players, okay? You know, the big picture, I've got to listen during the huddle. I got to think pre-snap. I got to play during the snap, and I got to finish as the whistle goes, okay? Now, I'm going to kind of, when I'm talking about hands and stuff, I don't know how familiar you are with what they call the double under. Okay, so one of the guys, I don't know if McNally came up with it, but there's a guy, Jim McNally, who's considered one of those guru type guys. He's worth researching. And what he does is the double under, which is my pinkies together and I'm lifting like this. Okay. Now with those older guys, with NFL guys, they can do that stuff. They tell them grab their belt loop and lift it up. But what I found is when I do this, when I tell them to get here and I don't harp it, I'm not going to minus them. I end up more on that old steering wheel that if you've ever heard that I'm going to grab that defensive player's cantilever and get that steering wheel. But by teaching that double under, okay, it's keeping my elbows tight right here, which takes away my blocking surface, okay? It also, it stops a lot of this holding stuff right here, okay? And it teaches me to tie my hands to my hips because when I'm bringing it right there like that. So what it is, and now I'm going to get real nerdy for a second, so bear with me. So if I was in physics, okay, and I have force vectors, if I had an offensive lineman that was coming off with a force that's going straight, you know, let's just call that east, and then I had a D lineman that's coming off with an equal force, let's just say they both have 5 Newton force just for simplicity. Okay, that's a net force of 0. This is your stalemate right here. Okay. Now also, let's say this guy's a 6. So the D lineman's a little better. I'm going to have a net force of -1 now. He's going to actually drive me back a little bit. But what I can do by not just pushing, but lifting is I can sit there and create a different force angle. Okay. So now instead of coming straight at him, if I can lift as I push, right here and he's still just pushing, I can now create a net positive force right there. So I think that's an important thing that you've got to lift and drive up. I think, you know, a lot of people don't think that you can't just come straight out. I mean, it's science. And you can't argue with science. I mean, you can, but you know, it's hard. But anyway, so like, just finishing up with steps, and then I'm going to move on to kind of more inside zone play. I know I said I was going to talk more about it, but I get excited about O-line. Another thing that if you haven't read the Charles Bentley book, and I hate to just, you know, endorse other people or anything like that, but I think there's a lot of great books out there. And at the end, I'll share there's a lot of great O-line coaches to follow. But he talks about external cues rather than internal cues. And I think if you can learn to coach with external cues, otherwise talking about things that are going on the outside, and coach by how things feel. Okay. When I tell a player, hey, I got to step right. Okay. He can step right, but his hips may stay behind. I really want him to displace his hips. So instead of just saying step right, coach, like stand up for a second, coach. Let's do a little experiment. So at first, I want you just to step right. Just step right. Okay. You've been playing a little ball, so you just placed your hips right. Otherwise, just get a wider stance. Just step right. Okay. Now get your feet back together. Now I want you, instead of thinking about stepping right, I want you to drive your left knee into the ground. I want you to drive the earth left and go right. So try that now.
So
do you see how much more movement you get?
Yes. Yeah. I get what you mean.
So that's what an external cue is. You can sit back down, coach. I think that's an important thing to understand, that if I say things like drive your backside knee into the ground, I'm going to actually displace my hips over more rather than just step. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I think those are important things. And again, it goes into that physics deal, Newton's third law, action reaction. If I want to step left, what I'm really trying to do is drive the world right. If I want to step right, I want to drive the world left. Does that make sense? And so when you start thinking about things and you start trying to explain things and ask them, well, how does it feel right there? Did you feel that strain? I think I've been lucky enough to perform a lot of the blocks, so I know how they feel, because I think it's an important thing that you cannot perform a kinesthetic movement until you actually know how it feels. And I think as coaches, we forget that sometimes, that we watch film, we say, well, crap, this is easy. Why don't you get it? Well, if he's never done it, he doesn't know. If he's never sat there and done a shrug, he doesn't know how I should feel tension right there on the back side of my scapula, right there pulling up. It's going to be a little tight around the neck. If he's never done power cleans properly, he doesn't know that strain that he's going to get right in that bottom part of my abs, and that strain and those hip flexors as I get triple extension. But if you can explain things in that sense, if you can explain things like when you're talking about punches and pass, hey, I want to punch through, not to, because a lot of people don't know how to punch anymore. It's the good thing people don't fight like they used to. I'm 38. When I was in high school and stuff, it wasn't too much for people to still be like, all right, well, it's square up, nowadays you're not seeing that as much, which is a great thing, but you have a lot of kids that don't actually know how to punch. They don't know how to deliver hands through things. And I think it's important to train stuff like that. And always, when you're watching something, if guys aren't getting it, there's only two things. I don't know if you've heard this. You're either coaching it or allowing it, right?
Correct.
So you got to sit there and make sure, are you being a bad coach or are they being bad players by not understanding? And it's important to do that self-reflection and make sure. And those are just some things that I believe are important about coaching that really helped me, that learning how to coach through feels, like asking them, what do they actually feel? And then learning how to implement more external cues rather than internal cues, especially for kids and a lot of people, it doesn't make much sense to sit there and kick slide, and again, that's the Charles Bentley term. He calls it drive catch, because I want to drive off that front foot right there. So I think it's important to do some stuff like that. I want to turn like a tank. If I'm getting to landmarks, I want to turn my whole body like a tank. It's sitting there trying to make it relative. There's no such thing as making things too easy. I get off on a lot of tangents. I'm sorry, Coach. But if you haven't ever looked up the Richard Feynman technique, Feynman, it's actually scientifically proven the best way to learn things, okay? And it also, Feynman was an astrophysicist who said, if you can't explain something to a sixth grader, you don't know it. And I think that's an important thing, that if you can't sit there, so if you can't explain something to a sixth grader, you don't really know it, If you have to sit there and use words that you read, do you really understand it? And so I think it's important. And in the Feynman technique talks about paraphrasing things that you read writing what you understand, writing what you don't understand, answering those questions, and going back through. It's a 4-step method, and it changed how I learned a lot of things, and it made a lot of sense that you should always be able to explain things in a very basic sense, because we deal with kids, and when you got athletes, it's not his job really as much to learn. If he's a player, it's our job to get him on the field, and it's our job as coaches to make sure he understands. So you can't be a coach that's stubborn and says, well, this is how I teach, and if he doesn't learn, then that's his fault. No, he's the player. We got to be the ones that adapt, and we've got to be the ones that make sure that we're differentiating that education to make sure that they're doing best. So I think that's all the philosophy stuff I got. Now, let me try to pull up. I'll start talking about a little inside zone. This is just a little inside zone install presentation I put in when I got to Summer Creek 2 years ago.
Okay.
As the run game coordinator, just some things. I'm going to hit it real quick. We can watch a little film, and if you got any questions, just throw them out there, Coach.
Will do.
To me, I think this is an important thing. Inside zone is a finesse play with hard-nosed blocking. I think sometimes old tops that haven't been around, those wing T guys that don't quite understand zone and stuff, they think it's really just flash and pomp and circumstance, when in fact, no. I mean, I am trying to displace bodies vertically. I'm a true inside zone is my baby. It is my favorite play. I think when it's ran well, it's a man's play. It is taking another person and moving him when he doesn't want to move. I want to move him vertically, so it's got finesse with that. Has all the run play essentials. You got the play itself. You got to counter off of it when you do the zone read stuff. So if they want to load up to your strong side, or if you got certain tendencies, you still have outlets off of it. And especially, this hadn't been updated since I've started getting into the RPO stuff, and since it's getting big, it's always good to have outlets out of things and look at all that. O-line must see it as a hard-nosed play. I want my guys to understand that this is the play that we're going to get 4 yards. I want them screaming for this play. I want them asking the head coach. I want them asking everybody, run this, run this. I want them lining up, telling the defense, this is what we're going to run. We're going to run it right here, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And if they get that mindset, Coach, you can start to get some good things going, okay? A big part of it is on all run plays is that both offensive and defensive line are trying to reestablish the line of scrimmage. If you go back and look at successful runs in your self-scout on your end of your season, if your guys knocked back the D lineman 1 yard, otherwise reestablish that line of scrimmage 1 yard downfield, you probably had a positive play. Probably had an efficient player, more than 4 yards. But you look at those plays where those D linemen knocked you back a yard. Those probably weren't very good, okay? The back's path much matched the O-line's AOD is angle of departure. Coach, this is big, 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 big. And it's just starting to even kind of make sense to me, but it was told by a guy that I learned from, my mentor offensive line-wise, who I learned the most from, was a guy named Pat Rippey, who coached at Nevada Reno under Chris Alt forever, won a national championship there in 1989. I was offense coordinator at Abilene Christian, offense coordinator at A&M Kingsville in Texas. Spent most of his time in the college ranks, but at the twilight of his career, I was lucky enough to learn from. A couple of things he said is you don't watch film, you study it. And you've got to make sure that back's path, that your mesh point and stuff is going to match your offensive lineman, okay? If you look at tight zone or A-gap zone, you look at wide zone, C-gap zone, you look at bounce or stretch where they're going hash number sideline, like true outside zone, old school, you'll notice one thing, that most of the big runs, that back is still hitting A-gap. Now, A-gap may be on the numbers now, but because the offensive lineman and because him have that same angle of departure, you've given yourself a chance to be successful. That's your tank out in front of you, right? They're going to plow through things. So if he gets off one side or the other, now I'm removing gaps that I have secure. But if I can maintain a relationship where I'm behind the center, I know that I'm secure for 2 to 3 gaps on each side, if, in a perfect world, okay? The back gets one cut. You cannot stutter it. He's going to sit there. He's going to press A gap, and he is going to hit it. When he gets to the heel line of the offensive lineman, by that point, he makes his decision. I don't know if you've heard of bend, bounce, or bang. Bending is going backside, bounce is getting out play side, and banging is just hitting it right there. Okay? So everything zone-wise is covered, uncovered. This is stuff most people know. This is what I believe in. Covered simply for the most basic generic point is that do I have a first level defender either head up, play side, or backside of me, like on my person? Okay, that's the only three things they can do. Okay, they're either going to be head up, they're going to be play side shade, or a backside shade. If I'm covered on inside zone, my landmark, and landmarks are what I'm trying to aim at. That's what I tell my offensive linemen how we get there, right? Like we take steps, like I don't know how much a lot of y'all do, like Pell steps, half buckets, full buckets, lateral steps, jab step, whatever you want to call it, brace hang, whatever your terminology is, but you have terms for your steps. So I don't want robots. I don't tie their hands. I don't say you have to take this step. What I say is we got to get to our landmark, and we got to cover up his hip. So our landmark on that for the covered guy is play side number. So I'm going to take my backside hand and a half bench, which means I've just got one hand. I'm going to attack that play side number. I'm going to take my backside knee. I'm going to try to knee him in the crotch and make sure that I'm square and that my backside hip is on his play side hip, and I've got half of that man. Okay? Because what's going to happen is my uncovered guy, and here's just what I mean by play side, head up, and backside right here. Backside shade, head up, play side shade right there, basic stuff. So my uncovered guy, he is going to suck up the air between him and the covered guy. He's got to get over there hip to hip next to him, right? And his landmark is backside number. So he's taking his play side hand, play side knee him in the crotch. Both guys are trying to knee him in the crotch because what that creates is what called a high hip. And I always want a high hip on the guy that I'm in contact with, especially in combos, because it's going to help me displace that guy. It's going to help me stay square. Okay, so I'm working that guy to a linebacker that is in a play side zone. If you want to look at all zone play, I'm secure with my offensive lineman, play side C gap, all the way to backside B gap. When in doubt, I've got to make sure nothing gets through those guys, okay? And here you can see play side number, backside number right there, okay? And the duck walk is just making sure that my feet fire and I'm getting all cleats in the ground because I can't take long steps, okay? Running back, is going to depend on your guy. Is he patient or not? Because a lot of it's got to develop. You really want him getting the ball. You want the mesh. In my opinion, I think you want it right around the same time that guys are getting together for their combos. They haven't started the drive yet, but they've secured. They've got hip to hip. They've made contact with first level. At that point, he should be getting the ball. He's going to press that play side A gap, and he's going to be reading that center's block. Okay, so if the play side A gap, if I'm looking at that center right there, and let's just say they're in an Okie or a 3-4, whatever you want to call an odd front. I'm looking at that center, okay? If his screws have got play side leverage, I know I can bang play side A gap right there. But if that defensive lineman is in that play side A gap and I see that center and he has ended up having a wash, now I know I'm going to have to bend it to backside A gap right there. But he's got to sit there and stay square, and the quarterback has to carry out the fade. Quarterbacks can't be lazy on this. They've got to take at least 4 steps at that end to make sure that they're respecting him, okay? Quarterback is going to be sitting there about 5 yards. He's reading, he's drop side foot, and this varies. I've kind of even changed past this. I made this a couple of years ago. But the point is that he's got a frame, quarterback's got a frame wherever his read is, whether it's the backside end, the backside linebacker, backside backside flat or forced defender, wherever his read is, he needs to be squared up to it so he can make a good decision right there, okay? He's looking at that end. If he's crashing, getting his shoulders turned, he's pulling, if he's upfield or blocked, then he's going to get it, Quarterback looks for the 3 Ps. He's looking for pace, position, and path. He's looking for those things. And I think, again, there's a second time you'll see that I group things, and it's all based off of that's how people learn. So this right here looks like it's going to be our inside zone to the left. I really don't like the back's path. He shouldn't get so turned. But luckily, Coach, this is the guy I was telling you about. This sophomore right here, Coach, is 6'6", 280. And he's been offered by pretty much everybody, Coach. He's the most special kid. I've dedicated my whole life to O-line, and he does sophomore mistakes. But, Coach, he's on a different level, Coach. And again, I'm blessed. This guy's a junior. I've got this guy, and this guy all coming back next year. This guy will be a third-year starter. He is 6'5", 6'6", 280, 290. My runt right here is still about 230, 220, somewhere around there. Center was a rotund fella, but moved all right. This guard right here is real dependable, about 240, 250. And we got a big offensive line, Coach, so we're able to do some things. So just looking at a couple of things. Okay, you can see, boom, hip to hip right here. Eyes are looking at our linebackers. That's what we're looking for right there on the inside zone. Okay, if the back, notice how if the back was more square, a little how easier it had been to make this right here. You know, he's having to bend it back on him. This guy's in position to take him off. And so now, and it's still a productive play, don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to hit exactly what I'm kind of looking for on some of this stuff. Is this 20? Yes. Now this guy's path, this running back was a senior this past year. I really felt like his path was best. Look how square his shoulders are throughout the hole. You see how he gets right down A-gap?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And you can see, so we're covered, uncovered, and we're going to the left right here. So he knows he's covered right there. If he's covered and he's covered, our solo blocks are called a win. So he has a win right here. He knows he's covered. He's uncovered. So they're working right here to the linebacker that's in their zone right there. Okay? Covered, uncovered, working up to that zone. So we should have got these two combos vertically with a win right here on this guy. This guy's pressing A-gap in. So out of the split back right here, 20 personnel, I think if you've got a guy that can play like a lot of colleges have, that can H now, that can move around and be a slot right here. He can be a tight end. He can get out wide. He can be back there. He can catch. He can run. He can throw. In my experience, it's been like an AP kid that just grinds his butt off most of the time. Those guys are freaking valuable, and without any tags or anything, we have him just being a cruiser for the quarterback pull out of 20 personnel. But some various things that you can do, and I can draw up. You can have a zone insert deal, which is essentially he's taking over the backside linebacker where you get almost an ISO concept. You can sit there. If this guy walked up, you can account for overhang, have a call for that. You can sit there and get him out in the flat, read your force defender. You can sit there. What are some other things you can do? I mean, you can do a ton of stuff with those 20 personnel guys. They're very versatile. But right here, we just have him going for the cruiser. Boom. If the quarterback would have pulled, he would have kept it. He's just out there lead blocking for that guy. Boom. Okay, that's not a bad job by the center. I'd prefer him not to get past midline. He loses the block when right there. See how he gets past midline? If his body gets turned, that allows for the spin. I really don't like the guard right there. He's trying to get off on linebacker way too quick. Let's see what else we got. I guess there's a decent pull right here. You can see quarterback. That guy's in. Shoulders get turned. Take off to the races. Okay, and that's just the read part of it. So there's the counter, right? So it's still just a 5-man box, but if it's 6-man box, we got 5. We got to account for him somehow. So when this guy got his shoulders turned and collapsed right there, quarterback knows to pull it. I think it's important to tell those guys, don't arc out. They need to be as tight off that butt as possible to get north-south as soon as possible right there is an important thing. See how we did blocking. When Luke should have stayed on, his hips get a little off. I would rather see this guy just, like I said, he's a sophomore. I don't like him turn so much. I would ideally want him getting hip to hip and getting vertical on that stuff, but he's a monster, and sometimes you just don't screw those guys up. You know what I mean? I coach him. I got expectations, but heck, I don't want to be the guy that screws up the 5-star tackle. So in the end, he's got a little bit more free will than some, and that's how sports works. You don't want to inhibit players. So you can see here on the pull, the cruiser, boom, is able to take care of that overhang for the quarterback. Now he gets a little tripped up, but that's just an example of what that guy does right there. And that was early in the season, so it's probably ugly, but let's take a look. This is like game 2, maybe. Boom. That's a good track right here. Notice how he doesn't vary off his path, and he's right there for the linebacker. That's a great job by the left guard. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Track. See how his feet always move? Keeps his feet in the ground, allows him to take it. I'd prefer him. He got lost. That was a baseball player that was experimenting with football. A great athlete, but I see now he goes and gets daggum turned. Where if he wouldn't have got turned, like I said, this guy right here, he was the best. He wasn't the fastest or the most talented, but daggum, that's the path. See how he can squeeze through little holes like that?
Mm-hmm.
Just giving him an alley in there. What else we got? Boom. Oh, no, not that one. But there's my big guy. Look at this guy. That's finishing right there, Coach. Drive the guy out of the picture right there. Drive him out of the picture. That wasn't the play that I thought it was. That wasn't as good as I wanted. But we ran the ball well again. They had a great little scheme, man. That you'll see that they look like these guys twist, but the looper was actually reading stuff. And right there, that looper, and he would redirect, man. We caught him a couple of times, but it's important on stuff like that they don't chase out of their zone. Like the center kind of chased out of his zone right there, and it kind of whipped us back. His pass should have been tighter. He could have got a little bit better of a play out of it. Drive. Oh, I was almost there, backside. We're still, and you can see when those shoulders get turned, and I remember talking to my guys during it, when our shoulders are turned, we don't effectively block it up. But when we're square, it hits. This is one I was thinking earlier. And you can see we're square now. He should have got forward a little bit more, but it allows him to hit A gap right there. Okay. And we're maintaining drive. Finish on a body. I give them DNFs every time they don't finish and if they're not blocking someone when the whistle or the clip ends, I give them a DNF and I put it in the locker room. I track DNFs, sacks, MBs, which are mental bust, and then all the good stuff. This is the good one right here. This one, it parts right here. We don't chase. We stay square. His path is tighter. Boom. There it is, Coach. That's inside zone. Just hits A gap right there. We don't chase out of our zone. We keep climbing, come off on linebackers. It's beautiful, Coach. I love well blocked inside zone is some great stuff.
My real question is not even so much zone and it kind of goes back more to your philosophy. Like when you're practicing and installing to start the year, like what does your approach look like? What is your here's my everyday practice plan. This is what we have to start with. This is where we start people at. What does that look like? That's more my curiosity.
So, my head coach, Kenny Harrison, is really, really great about giving us plenty of meeting time. I have on average, because the offensive linemen, we're not on any special teams, but PAT, I average probably 30, 45 minutes of meeting time a day, and then I get that also during I've got my install deal. I'll show you. So what I'll do first off, okay, so, and I'm in the process of updating this. So when I install, in every meeting, they have to I give them a notebook and I give them a pencil. I'm real big on, I'm going to give everything that they got. That way they never have an excuse. And it allows me, because I can get a little excited and I can jump a little butt, but I'll only do it because I've taken out all the things. So I go over kind of what I was talking about with you. I go over everything. I make sure, because I think communication has to come first. They have to speak the same language. Otherwise, things will get lost in translation. I remember my first year coaching, I told a guard, I just got done playing college ball and I was coaching junior high. And I was like, all right, you got to pull and kick the end, 3 times in a row, he never pulls. And I'm like, what are you doing? And then finally he was like, well, coach, I don't know what a pull is. And it's like, whoa, you got to realize that those guys don't know what and it's real easy to sit there and watch them go the wrong way and jump butt. But then I think back, hell, I remember learning an offense and doing the old double guard pull into each other, and I pulled into it, and now I think I'm something special, So I was that idiot one time. So I will go through day one, and before we even start teaching plays during fall camp, we're making sure that we understand what I call fronts. Like a 50 or an Okie is a 3-4, stack being a 4-3, split being a 4-2, where you can have under split stuff. What a first level defender is, second level defender, what we call those people. I group things by my zones. The words are grouped. We have zone schemes, gap schemes, man schemes, because again, grouping things helps. I go over covered, uncovered principles. I go over what our calls are. Steps. Then I go into what the plays are, what our pass protections are, stuff like that. So day one, I'm sitting there and they're writing all that in.
Okay.
So then what I do is throughout a week, now let's say we get to this. So I've installed plays. We've met. Now I'm setting practice schedules. So preseason things are pretty basic. We're going to work our most basic things, but I always scaffold stuff. Like we're going to start out either on the 5-man sled or on the boards, working our solo technique, making sure we understand how it feels, even if we're working half man on it, that we understand how our hip leverage and square is. Then we go 2-on-2 drill, which is just zoning up. 2 offensive linemen versus 2 defensive linemen, or, in their position certain ways. Then we'll go half line with the back, because the back needs to see a lot of reps behind. And so that would be just like on an average, like our zone days. So Mondays, I emphasize kind of zone. Tuesdays, I emphasize our gap plays, otherwise like counter power stuff. So on those days, I'm lucky enough, I have an assistant O-line coach. He'll take half the line and work pulls, or he'll work our double combos or our gap combos, and then we'll flip, because, you can't have dead time. They're not going to learn it by talk. They're not coaches. I think one of the biggest things is coaches get caught up in talking, and they got to just do it. And you want to film as much as you can, and whatever you have, like convenience-wise. I know a lot of times you can film from your phone and upload to Huddle. Film your drills. But we're going to group things where we start with just the basic part and then add. And then as we get into the season, when I'm grading, I base my drill work off what I call deficiencies and necessities. So what are we going to need going into this week by our game plan? What do I need to make sure we work? Now, what were we bad at this last week? So I'm going to make sure that I emphasize those in my individual time. And so that's how I base a lot of my individual drills is based off what I call my deficiencies and necessities. Mondays, I put a lot of stuff in their hands. I put a lot of stuff in their hands. Number one, it shows them that I'm working. If I want these guys to give me all they got, I got to give them all they got. So Mondays, they get their points of emphasis sheet, and everything's got like a little watermark on it, because to me, I think it looks official. It didn't take much time front end, but if I was a kid and I got this stuff, I'd be like, oh shit, this is real, So Mondays, I put points of emphasis. It's going to have common fronts, stunts, any things that we talked about. Tuesdays or Mondays also, I got a thing I call the skill acquisition contract. So what it is every week based off what they grade, I have them pick one skill and then I pick one skill that's all we're going to work on that week. Because you can get real bad as a coach of sitting there and telling a kid 5,000 things one time, but you've only said 5,000 things one time, where it's better to cover two things 2,500 times a piece. So then each week I'm getting better at two things. And they've got a process that they've got to go through. They've got to get my signature. They've got to get the freshman O-line coach's signature, the assistant O-line coach's signature, and the head coach's signature on this paper. And to get it, they have to explain what they're working on that week and how they're going to do it. In film, if they mess up on that specific skill, they got to get up and explain where they messed up. They got to write it in the book. And so I'm just beating it into them. And it's one of those deals that I started last year and I loved it. But it's like, if I have, my goal is to win state every year. Okay? I refuse to be a coach that doesn't think on that level. I've got to be positive and stuff. So in 16 weeks, I get better at one or two things. Now that's 32 things that I perfected by the end of the year. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I put those things on Mondays. Thursdays, I give them a test. And so it just has all the fronts with different run plays, and they have to do all five. They have to draw all five positions with the calls. They bring that back Friday morning. I go over it, and then we go over it during lunch. They usually come eat in my room, and we'll go over the test. And then right before the game, I give them just the reminder sheet, and all it has is just quick little things. And I write a handwritten note on the bottom of it, because never underestimate how little touches like that can go forever. I mean, I know every handwritten letter I ever got, I was like, man, this is cool, man. And kids do the same thing. So I do that to them. I give that to them. And then when I grade, I don't have any of the sheets. I might can pull it up. I'll send it to you. But I grade off assignment, technique, effort, and it has boxes. So if I give a minus, I'm going to give why I gave a minus. And I have the whole packet, and then I cover sheet it. So I give them their grade on it, how many pancakes they got, how many cuts they got, how many mental blocks MBs. So otherwise they just screwed up. How many DNFs and how many sacks they gave. So I track that each week, and I put it in the locker room, the totals for the team, because little things like that go a long way, And so I put that much stuff in their hand because I want them to know that, number one, I'm all about them, and I'm going to do everything I can for them. I'm going to have them over to the house whenever they're freaking doing good. I'm going to go before games. It's all about building confidence. I'm going to go, and if a kid likes rap, I'm going to freestyle with him. It'll be terrible, but I'm trying to relate to those kids and keep them calm and show them, hey, we're in this together. And I know you like you said, you want to run through a brick wall, Coach. I know one of my best qualities that I have an infectious energy, and I always like to use that to my advantage. I think as coaches, you have to know what your best traits are and play those up. And my best traits as a coach is I have an infectious energy. I have a really, really just innate understanding of blocking. I always have. I know how it works, and I study a lot. I read as much as I can. I'm a lifetime learner, and then I'm pretty good with technology. Like I said, I'll make little graphic deals. I help run our school football page, and I'm going to do different graphic deals for all district and stuff like that, because the more that you can make it special for the kids, the more that you can show them that they're a part of something special, the more that you can get out of them, Coach. And that's the whole thing is I want to get the most out of those players. I don't want to take advantage of them. I don't want to use them. I want to show them that with hard work and with mutual respect, that we can obtain things that we never believed were possible. And by doing those things, Coach, I've set up future citizens. I think that's what football does. Football is a violent sport. There's an attack in it. But here's the deal. It's not toxic masculinity. It's masculinity. As a man, sometimes you got to know that things are going to go wrong. What are you going to do as a man when the fists start flying? You can't just freeze. In football, it gives you a controlled environment where they have to process and handle information. They have to produce a high level of technique, a high level of effort, a high level of just just get after their ass. They have to do it while freaking things are dynamic, while you're getting physically hit. And I think that transfer over. I think it's the one thing that football, or American football, brings to the table that other things don't. I also think that the technique and stuff has progressed well past what they show with the CTE stuff. The game is so much different now. You can't even consider any of the game really equivalent other than outside skewed people and skewed schemes from like 97. Information, the way we train at a young age, the equipment, the technique, especially like with blocking wise, has come so far. I never want my head involved. So I think that risk of the CTE and stuff, I think if we'll give it a chance, is lowering. I mean, hell, girls soccer, cheerleading, they have just as bad as CTE, but you never hear that, and I have problems with that because I think sometimes it's okay to be masculine, and football is a masculine sport. It's not made for everybody, and that's fine. That's not, if you don't want to play football, that doesn't make you less of a person. There's things that are out there for you, and I truly believe that. But I think it's for certain guys and that want to be a certain type of man that, and if you were to tell me, and like I said, I played college ball, there were a lot of, my knee, my back, my neck, and who knows what's wrong. I'm screwed up probably in the head, but I do it all again, guys, because I was a part of something special. I was part of a fraternity. I was part of a team that I dedicated to a common goal with other people that no one can ever take that away from me. And I know that I lined up with physical threat of injury and I didn't back down, and no one can ever take that away from me. And I think there's a lot of things that in society we misidentify that as toxic, and that's not toxic masculinity. And there is such thing as toxic masculinity, but football is not one of them, Coach.